Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are almost through with 2 Kings. We have 2 more weeks, 2 more sessions left. This one more. And we are, we actually left last time, cliffhanger. Hezekiah has been, threatened.
Yeah, more than threatened.
From Assyria,
we really had 2 big things that happened last week. The first is the northern kingdom left us.
It's gone, yep.
Yeah, so Assyria came in, and they did 2 things. One is they took out everybody.
Most of
well,
them,
they either killed or deported them and went back, and then they put their people, Assyrians, in place.
Yeah, and basically what's left from the Israelites, I mean, definitely all the powerful people, all the everything, but basically you've got... I mean, not to be disparaging, but you got your lower class people that even the Assyrians didn't want. So they left them.
Right. So that was the first thing, and then the second thing is Hezekiah, who is now king in the southern kingdom or Judah. He's got a big problem, right? He has Assyria knocking on the door, asking around, and and that's from the north, and then from the south he has. Who's got Ethiopia saying, coming up?
What are you going to do?
Yeah, right.
What are you going to do? You can't beat Assyria.
Yep. So what he did was he went to the temple and he prayed, and that's where we ended last week.
Yeah.
So we see that God has said, "I'll take care of it," and now in chapter 19, we see Isaiah coming back saying, "Hey, God has heard your prayer. This is what He says about the king of Assyria." And then we have basically a poem or a song in there.
Yeah, a whole list of stuff.
Yeah, there's a whole list of stuff, but basically, like the high points in there, right? Is there's a virgin daughter Zion, right? That's going to be representative of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem as a city's being portrayed as a young virgin in there.
Yeah. And she's making fun of Assyria.
Yeah,
she's laughing at Assyria.
Right. And then, who have you taunted? And that would be the Holy One, right? The God of Israel.
Yeah.
And I see those verses being like a big bass voice booming out in there. And then God talks about what He's done. And he goes way back. Some of these are a little odd. He cut down the cedars of Lebanon for His house, and that would be His temple. Mm-hmm. We get that. He dug wells in foreign lands, and we go back to Moses' time, and we can see that. Mm-hmm. He dried up the rivers in Egypt, and I love, with the soles of His feet.
Yes.
Just that little context. He didn't put a lot of effort into it.
I just sort of kicked the river out of the way.
Yeah. And then he kind of hits hard, right? I planned this long ago. I know where you live. I know what you're doing.
Yep.
I will put a hook in your nose and lead you back where you came from.
Right. And this is God's response to Hezekiah, but about Israel, or about Assyria. Right. This is what God's going to do to Assyria. I love verse 27. I know where you live.
Don't tempt me. Then there's a confirmation that God spoke the truth. And this is cool, too. This is God saying, here's how you know this will happen. So God says, here's what's going to happen for the next couple of years. Syria was around Jerusalem for a couple of years. They wouldn't have been able to plant crops. God said, I'll feed you naturally for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I'll let you eat. There's going to be enough left over without you having to plant anything that you'll be able to eat and subsist with no problem.
And then for that 3rd year, you'll be able to plant again sometime in there. So you'll be able to harvest in the 3rd year. So basically, He's also saying, I'm going to solve your problem.
Within 3 years,
the biggest nation is going to be out.
Yep.
Okay.
Not only that, Assyria is not going to enter the city, and He's not going to shoot an arrow.
Right.
I mean, that's not just He's not coming in, but He will not attack Jerusalem.
And He's not going to build siege machines, which would be the first thing that they would be doing.
Yep.
I will shield this city because I told David I was going to, and for my reputation. And we spent a lot of time on that last week.
Exactly what Hezekiah asked for. Yep. So that's great.
So 185,000 Assyrians were killed that night by an angel of the Lord, and the king left.
Yeah.
And then because he left, his sons killed him in a temple.
He went back to Nineveh in his God's temple to figure out what's going on here. And his own sons
killed him. Right. All right. So not that Judah is completely safe, but the major threat is gone, at least for now.
Yeah.
Now in in chapter 20, Hezekiah has a terminal illness. Yeah. And Isaiah told him, hey, God told me you need to give your instructions to your household. You're not long in this world.
Yeah.
Hezekiah turns towards the wall, weeps, prays to God. Really kind of an amazing thing. Isaiah leaves, so he's still within the compound, but he's not in the room anymore. And God says, hold on a minute, go back up and talk to him.
Which is, I mean, that sounds so fishy, doesn't it? And Hezekiah's going to think so too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So tell Hezekiah, I have heard his prayer. I've seen his tears. I'm going to add 15 years to his life and rescue you and the city from Assyria.
Yeah.
So Hezekiah says, okay, how do I know this is true? What is the confirming sign?
Which is really interesting because, because the prophets of God don't typically flip that quickly. You're going to die. Turn around, walk out. Well, okay, God said, no, you're not. Here's 15 more years.
Really?
How
do I know that didn't come from you?
Yeah. I mean, but this
so
is
we don't
Isaiah.
know the way, and we don't know the way this played out, right? It's just us kind of, interpreting what
right,
how this went out in here.
So there's a favorite sort of Sunday school story in here. God's going to make the shadow work backwards instead of forward or whatever. But it's called on the steps of the stairs of Ahaz, which is funny because Ahaz and Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 7, God says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to protect you. And Isaiah asks Ahaz, you want a confirmation? Just like this, except Hezekiah here asked, could I have a confirmation because this doesn't sound right? Isaiah asked Ahaz, you want a confirmation? And Ahaz is trying to be all super spiritual. I would never ask the Lord for a confirmation. And Isaiah says, here's your confirmation. The Lord himself will give you a sign. The young woman will bear a child and call his name Emmanuel, right? So that verse becomes famous. It was on the steps of Ahaz. And so there's almost this light dark, this back and forth going on here with the names.
Yeah, so one of the things I read said the stairs also might have been able to tell time from the standpoint of where the sun is hitting on the stairs. You can tell
what time
where you're on the day. Okay, that's not a big secret, right? Or anything special.
But it always goes one direction.
Yeah. So it went the other direction, right? And that was a confirming sign,
right? And that was his thing: is you want which way do you want the shadow to go? Well, it always goes this way. So maybe if we go the other way. Right. Only God can do that, which is great. Okay, no problem. He's talking to God.
Yeah. All right. So there's part of this chapter we got to talk about a little bit because it doesn't make sense to me. Assyria's been the big threat.
Yep.
God removed it, and I'm sure there's been a passage of time versus one or two chapters where we're reading, but representatives from Babylon now come into Israel. This is the new powerhouse, right? They're the up and coming powerhouse.
The up and coming, I think, is the key.
Okay, so what does Hezekiah do? He shows them all the wealth of the treasury.
Yeah.
Now, in one case, he's probably pretty happy because there is some treasury there. Because last week they were peeling the silver off the doors, so there wasn't much there.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you think he's an idiot for showing this big powerhouse that, hey, we got a bunch of money and here's where we keep it?
Yeah.
Okay. So Isaiah then tells Hezekiah, he doesn't say you're an idiot and all that. But he does say there's a time coming when everything in your palace is going to be carried away to Babylon. And some of your offspring are going to be eunuchs in the palace at Babylon.
Yep.
And Hezekiah responds with, oh no, what should I do? He responds with, the Lord's message is appropriate. At least there will be peace and stability in my time.
In my lifetime, yeah.
I care about myself. So the question to you, is he an idiot? Is he only thinking about himself? Or am I missing what the plan is?
Yeah, see, this is, like you said, this is a weird one. And last time we were talking, it seems like the first half of his reign was really, really good. Right. And the second half just seems, goes a little weird, right? So I think the key here is that Babylon is up and coming, right? And it's interesting because where Isaiah asked, hey, where did these people come from? Verse 14, they come from the distant land of Babylon. They're like way out there. They're not Assyria. They're not, but they are also, if he knows that they're up and coming, maybe he's thinking, we can do an alliance.
Right. I have money. I can pay you.
Yeah. Against Assyria. Right. Because they're knocking on Assyria's door. Well, so he's also seems to be wandering away from God a little bit in this last half of his reign after his illness, in recovery.
Which is very strange. God gives you 15 more years. I'm going to go away from God.
You'd think he'd be closer, right? We'll talk about Manasseh next, but his son Manasseh was born during this time. Okay, I mean, literally think about it. Had Hezekiah not lived, had he died, Manasseh never would have been born.
Okay, so it was
Because
even
he
after.
was 12 years old when he took the throne,
Oh, right. And he
which
got
is
15 more
within that
years,
15 years, right? And Manasseh was one of the worst kings in Judah. How did he build all this stuff? And we'll see this in the next chapter. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. How did he rebuild? Where did he get the idea that he should rebuild all of the idolatry and bring it back even with more force than some of the ancestors, right?
Yeah, had to at least start with his dad.
Yeah, how did Hezekiah not train him better than that? So there seems to be this weird Hezekiah going away from God in his son, in showing off to the Babylonians, maybe trusting in them to have some kind of an alliance here. And then when Isaiah said, your own descendants are, this stuff is going to be taken to Babylon, that's Daniel chapter 1. That's exactly what happened in Daniel chapter 1, and then with Ezekiel, and finally in Jeremiah's day, they just stripped everything and it was gone.
Okay. There is a cool thing at the end of chapter 20, though. If you think about it, Jerusalem was under siege, so everything that you have inside the walls is what you got, and nothing more. So there's always a water shortage when they were under siege. So what Hezekiah did is he actually tapped into a pool outside, and this was not while they were under siege.
Right.
Tapped into a pool that was outside of the walls and had a channel dug that would be able to bring it inside.
Yeah.
Which is way cool.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, Jerusalem's on rock.
Yeah.
So they were
and it's raised.
Yeah, they were on rock and did this. Quite an engineering feat. We're talking 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's not like they had all these great tools. And supposedly one group started on one end, one group started on another end, and they met in the middle.
Which is also a pretty amazing thing.
Right, and a third of a mile. Which, okay, it's
doesn't sound like it's big.
Let's go get some machine today and we can do it in a day.
Yeah,
but,
500 yards or whatever, 600 yards.
Yeah,
but
quite a feat.
But Hezekiah's tunnel is a very famous thing.
And it's still there today.
Still,
well, I think they refound it a couple times, I think.
Right. It does show up in the Gospels a couple of different times. That was what was connected to the pool of Siloam, which is where Jesus put the mud on the man's eyes, the blind man, and said, go wash in the pool of Siloam. That pool inside the city was fed through Hezekiah's tunnel from the water source outside the city. So even Jesus was using this 600 years later, which is pretty cool.
That is way cool.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 21. Hezekiah passes away. His son takes over.
Yeah, Manasseh.
Manasseh, when he was 12, he reigned for 55 years. Bad guy.
Yeah, which he did actually turn at the end of his life. Now, 2 Kings isn't really going to tell us that, but 2 Chronicles will.
Yeah, it says Manasseh misled Judah so that they sinned more than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites.
He was a bad guy. And especially for, like you said, 55 years. He was a bad king for a long time.
Right. So God announced during this time, and probably for this reason, I'm about to bring disaster on Judah and Jerusalem. I will do the same thing that I did in Samaria. I like this, well, kind of like it, right? I will wipe Jerusalem clean, just as one wipes both sides of the plate.
Yeah.
Right? Did the northern kingdom, going to do the southern kingdom.
Well, verse 16, furthermore, Manasseh killed so many innocent people. He stained Jerusalem with their blood from end to end, in addition to encouraging Judah to sin by doing evil in the sight of the Lord. I mean, that's God's summary of
what's going on here.
What he's done. Yeah. He's not just, I mean, he's killing babies. He went back to offering babies, as burnt sacrifices and fire to these gods and everything. Terrible time in Judah's history.
So a question: God makes an announcement here. Who does God make an announcement to?
The nation at large, to the king. I mean, he says he's doing it through his servants, the prophets.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would he also be announcing into heaven so angels or angelic beings would understand what's going to happen to?
Yeah. So I mean, you could say it's because you're right. Angels don't know things in advance like God does, right? They're sort of waiting like we are.
Right. So, but yet, I assume they're watching and being able to get news about what's going on Earth.
Yeah.
And being able to know what's going to happen. God's saying, "I'm going to take care of it." Okay, this ought to be good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I believe Isaiah was martyred during Manasseh's reign, but there were other prophets around. Sort of like if you remember Elijah, woe is me, I'm the only one. And God says, I've got 7,000 others. They're not necessarily all prophets back then, but we see this concept of there were prophets. There were constantly prophets that God had. So, Isaiah gets named, some of these. But
Right, and you kind of think he's the only one, right? Because
but
he's the main one.
Yeah, but he's not,
Okay, new king comes in, Amon. He reigns for 2 years. He's in and out pretty quick.
Yep.
His son, Josiah, is 8 when he becomes king. He reigns for 31 years. He followed in David's footstep, did what the Lord approved.
Again.
8-year-old.
Yep.
Yeah,
which means when we've seen this before with Joash, which means he had a good mentor, he had somebody good who was helping him. Because an 8-year-old, obviously,
he's not going to do it by himself.
When his dad and his grandpa, we're literally talking 60 years almost of terrible, an 8-year-old doesn't know anything.
Right. So if you think about it, everything that would have happened, sacrifices, anything for God, is now 2 generations ago at least, if not longer.
Manasseh did turn at the end a little bit. He did repent and turn at the end. It was sort of a too little, too late type thing, but it was something. Right. So there was a little bit of a resurgence of truth going on, but not a lot.
Yeah, so under Josiah, he was making improvements to the temple using silver that had been donated. So adding back to the doors, I don't know, right? But also the idea was a scroll was found in the temple.
Yeah.
Right, and they read it before the king. And I'm assuming that this would have been the law of Moses or maybe even the book of Deuteronomy.
Yeah, because they're going to mention that they are reading what God promised to do, the curses and the blessings. That is definitely Deuteronomy. Yeah. Yep.
So imagine finding a scroll that turns out to be, this is the law that your nation should be following, and realizing you're not doing any of this. Yeah.
But again, you got Josiah with some good mentors and some good, people around him who say, dude, this is like, we need to do something here.
Right. So they go to a prophetess, a woman prophet, and said, God said this about the king. I'm going to bring disaster on this place, right? This nation. But because you humbled yourself and tore your clothes, I'll allow you to die and be buried in peace.
Yeah.
Kind of a cool thing for this.
Yeah. So
young
again,
king.
Because we're reading this so quickly and some time has passed here, but Hezekiah said, well, at least I get to die in peace. Well, God told Josiah, you will be able to die in peace because you're doing what I want you to do.
Which is way different.
Yeah. Right.
So the king reads the law to all the residents in Jerusalem, which is what the king is supposed to do. They renewed the covenant, which is what they're supposed to do. They agreed to follow the Lord and obey all of his commandments, and all the people agreed.
Yep.
Okay, now we've seen this before.
We've seen everything the Lord has said we will do.
It's good. All the foreign items was removed. They list them all out. Right.
And it almost, the way you read it, it almost is like Josiah is actually
systematically.
Well, and doing it, and not doing it himself, but overseeing it himself. Like he is standing there, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And he turns around and he sees a grave marker, and there's all this other stuff going. He is like some cool physically hands-on.
Leave that one. That one's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're on a high point here.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
that's 2 weeks in a row.
I know. We're going to stop in chapter 23, verse 20. Well, in these last few verses, before we stop here at the end, he's going to there's an altar there to a false god, and he's going to burn some bones on it and all this stuff, and it says just like God had promised. Okay. He would.
So the question is, where is that?
Where was this? So I did some digging around, because I remembered he had done this, but I couldn't remember exactly the reference, right? So I looked back and I had to keep turning backward and backward and backward and backward and backward. We have to go. This is 2 Kings 23. We have to go all the way back to 1 Kings 13.
Wow.
Almost 300 years ago.
Yeah. So are we even in Solomon at that point?
Yeah, we are actually in the first king of the divided kingdom.
Oh, okay.
Right after the split, Solomon's son Rehoboam in the south, Jeroboam in the north. And because Jeroboam was so evil, a prophet said, God is going to send, a son will be born named Josiah, who is going to clean this place up, including burning bones on this altar that you set up to desecrate it. That was almost 300 years ago that God promised that. And here we're seeing
now
the
we're seeing
fulfillment in 2 Kings 23.
Nice.
Yeah, like
Those
literally
tie-ins
by
are-
name.
tie-ins are
Josiah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Very
for bringing it
cool.
up.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks in a row, we're like ending on a high point. It's like, what could go wrong? Well, it comes in threes, right? So next week, we come to the end of 2 Kings. We will see Judah fall. But for today,
Right.
we get to end with Josiah doing a big thing.
I'm saying even next week we'll see a promise at the end of,
Yep.
There's Hope.
There is hope. There is hope. But for now, Josiah is doing some pretty amazing stuff, really cleaning up Judah. So Hezekiah and Josiah, some really good kings on either side of a really, really bad one.
Right.
So hopefully you are encouraged by this. We're almost to the end of 2 Kings. Yeah, there's some hope in the next one, but yeah, a little bit bittersweet the next one. But we'll get there. Enjoy the wins on this one. Take your time reading through it. Fortunately, this doesn't go through a lot of Manasseh's stuff. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell his turn. I would encourage you to pop over to 2 Chronicles and actually see some of that stuff where Manasseh actually does repent a little bit, if you want some good news there. And but we'll see you back here next time, and we will actually finish the book of 2 Kings.
All right. Bye, everybody.